Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Birmingham. Whoever you are, whoever you love, wherever you are today, and wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Our sermon this morning comes from Reverend Christina Spod of the UU Church of Tarpon Springs in Florida. Each week this summer, our sermons will come from UU ministers from around the country, just as Reverend Julie shared last week's sermon with these churches as well. To all who are here this morning, welcome home. Welcome to our visitors. Please let us know you are here by filling out our connection card. You can find this online at bit.ly, that's bit.ly/UUCB connection. Our church is planning to resume in-person services on August 15th, but we will need your help. Please sign up to volunteer at bit.ly, bit.ly/UUCB open. Lastly, we are participating in a habitat build in Centerpoint. Please sign up to work a Saturday at bit.ly/UUCB serves. Please also watch your email for more announcements from our church.
Welcome, friends and visitors, to our spiritual home, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs. My name is Diana Reif, and I am privileged to be your worship associate today for this remote service. We offer a warm welcome to all those who have joined us. We are a welcoming congregation, and we welcome members, guests, visitors, and friends. We welcome all thoughtful people to our journey through life's mystery with us, whatever your religious background or current belief, whatever your race, ethnicity, sexual or gender identity, lifestyle, or circumstance. And now we'll have the lighting of the chalice. Here today in this place and with these people, may we listen so that we may hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know. And may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice we light our way.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Reverend Christina Spouty will be speaking today on the heart of our faith. In this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath the foundation of our values and ethics. We are the people who return to love like a North Star and the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. Our hope does not live in some glimmer of an indistinct future. Rather, we know the way to the world of which we dream. And by covenant, and the movement forward of one right action and the next, we know that one day we will arrive at home. Those were opening words by Teresa Innes Soto.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Stay in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the giving life the shape of justice, roots only course, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our church is supported by those who call our church home and by those who support the efforts of our church to change our world for the better. We share our cash plate every Sunday with organizations whose work reflects UU values to care for marginalized persons, advocate for real and systemic change, defend our environment, and promote justice and equity for all. This month's Share the Plate recipient is Alabama Interfaith Refugee Partnership, an organization birthed out of our own congregation that helps refugees resettle in Birmingham.
During this time of social distancing and online worship, please know that church expenses continue. Therefore, we very much appreciate your continuing to pay your pledge or offer your donation by either mailing a check to the church office or by using PayPal or Venmo. Our Venmo account is at UUCBHAM. Please designate whether your offering is for UUCB or AIRP. Thank you for your generous support of our church and our Share the Plate recipient. May we give in love and in hope.
By using the chat feature in YouTube, speaking it aloud, or hearing it in your heart, please give voice to whatever is on your heart today. Our meditation this morning comes from Reverend Israel Bafardi of the UU Church of Lancaster. It's called The Struggle Continues. The road that lies ahead of us is a long one, and the pace of progress will sometimes feel glacially slow. Never forget that glaciers over time can carve out Grand Canyons and Great Lakes. Moving tectonic plates, they can rise up mountains over millennia, or they can explode awe-inspiring volcanoes in milliseconds. Our commitment to love and justice can do the same.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love.
Our story today is called The Treehouse Rules, and it comes from our Tapestry of Faith curriculum, Love Connects Us. The treehouse was built on the congregation's grounds over 3 Saturdays in September, using donated lumber and the donated labor of the families who attended the church and other adults who wanted to help with the project. Even the kids got involved, especially those aged 10 and up, by pitching in and helping in any way they could during the construction. It was a fantastic place to be once it was completed, with a window that faced the nearby playground, a rope ladder to climb up, and a slide to exit. While everyone was happy that the treehouse was there after all the planning and construction, it soon became a problem. When too many kids wanted to enjoy it at once, their different ideas about how to use it came into conflict with each other. The younger kids got a thrill out of racing across the top of it, hurriedly climbing up the rope ladder, rushing through the treehouse to race down the slide over and over again, one after the other. But the older kids wanted to hang out in the treehouse after the worship service ended, playing games like jacks and cards. One day, a second grader raced by and interrupted the fifth grader's game of cards for the 3rd time. That was it. A fight broke out with name-calling, pushing, and some tears. Some adults demanded that the treehouse be off limits until the children learned to cooperate with each other. Other adults protested that their children had special rights to use the treehouse because they had helped to build it. The Religious Education Committee had meetings about a policy for use of the treehouse. They were getting ready to report to the congregation's board of directors with their findings. Meanwhile, the minister considered bringing in a consultant from the chapter to address the conflict, which had now spread through the entire congregation. But while the adults were arguing, holding meetings, and creating policies, something happened. The children who had been temporarily banned from the treehouse started talking to each other and looking for ways they could all use the treehouse together. A few of them remembered the covenants they had created in their RE programs the year before. They suggested a covenant could be created for how the kids could use the treehouse. So they sat down and talked about why they liked the treehouse and what made it fun. They discovered ways they could all enjoy the treehouse in the ways they wanted to. They came up with a covenant which laid out how they would be in the treehouse and how they would respect others who were also using that space. Just as the adults were starting a congregational meeting to adopt a policy for use of the treehouse, some church leaders looked out the window. They saw the children cooperating with each other and using the treehouse without conflict. A teenager was dispatched to the treehouse to discover what rules the participants had come up with. And when she reported back to the adults at the congregational meeting, the announcement came that the participants had created a covenant with one another. The adults were humbled. Some sheepishly glanced at their church covenant framed on the wall, hanging there and mostly forgotten. The congregational meeting was adjourned. The adults went on their way, reminded of the power of covenants, working together to find a solution, and the commitment of people in right relationship with one another, all because of the treehouse rules.
And now let's sing our principal song together. One, each person is worthwhile, to be kind in all you do. 3, we help each other learn. 4, and search for what is true. 5, all people get a vote. 6, build a just and peaceful world. 7, we take care of the earth. That will bring us back to me and you too.
Our reading comes from Leslie Takahashi. This is called Marginal Wisdom. They teach us to read in black and white. Truth is this, the rest false. You are whole or broken. Who you love is acceptable or not. Life tells its truth in many hues. We are taught to think in either or, to believe the teachings of Jesus or Buddha, to believe in human potential or a power beyond a single will. I am broken or I am powerful. Life embraces multiple truths, speaks of both and of and. We are taught to see in absolutes, good versus evil, male versus female, old versus young, gay versus straight. Let us see the fractions, the spectrum, the margins. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of our worlds. Let us make our lives sanctuaries to nurture our many identities. The day is coming when all will know that the rainbow world is more gorgeous than monochrome. That a river of identities can ebb and flow over the static, stubborn rocks in its course. That the margins hold the center. Jersey Universalist Church was once a thriving religious community, recounts the Reverend Dr. Susan Ritchie, historian, professor, and Unitarian Universalist minister. As with many of our Universalist congregations across the more rural parts of the Midwest, it flourished with the message of universal salvation in the 19th and into the 20th centuries. But come the merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961, Jersey Universalist opted not to be contaminated with the Unitarian heresy, as Ritchie says, and they continued on into the 1990s and beyond as Universalists, being served faithfully by their Universalist minister until he died. Because the overwhelming majority of Unitarian and Universalist congregations did elect to be part of the Unitarian Universalist Association, there were no longer purely Universalist ministers to choose their next minister from following their longtime minister's death. And so Jersey Universalist Church returned to an old Universalist custom and ordained lay leaders from the congregation to serve as their ministers. A quick refresher on Universalism. Like Unitarianism in some ways, Universalism has been considered a heresy of Christianity and is distinctly U.S. American. Hosea Ballou, considered by many to be our first Universalist theologian, wrote in his A Treatise on Atonement that a truly loving God would want humans to be happy, and also that God would not condemn any of humanity to eternal damnation. We are all God's children after all, and God loves us no matter how dirtied we might become in our humanly living. Surely such love would have tenderness for us all. So the Jersey Universalist Church was ordaining lay ministers, and this seemed to serve the congregation well for a while. We know this because Reverend Ritchie serves a nearby congregation and would call to check in on them periodically, sharing the good word of our faith with them, as they were not in relationship with any other congregation, having not joined the Unitarian Universalist Association or any related organization. The congregation continued to be cared for, as was the building they met in, around the fourth or fifth lay minister that was ordained, though somehow something changed. Something was lost. And of all of the somethings to be lost, it was the message of universalism that they had lost. Not only was it lost, but somehow the message had been completely flipped. The lay minister there had begun preaching a doctrine of hell and damnation. The congregation has since closed. Looking further back in Unitarian Universalist history, it wouldn't be wrong to be surprised that Unitarian Universalists draw the cornerstone of our faith from the Pilgrims, who were religious separatists, and the Puritans, who were religious non-separatists. Both wanted reform of the church, but chose to address it differently. The Pilgrims rejected professions of faith like the Nicene Creed, a Trinitarian statement of faith, not only because it was Trinitarian, but because it was a creed. And the Pilgrims affirmed religious tolerance, refusing to persecute the Quakers as the Puritans had, and maintaining a 40-year peace pact with the Wampanoag peoples. Both the Pilgrims and the Puritans rejected hierarchical church authority, believing in each congregation's right to self-governance by the vote of its members. The Puritans were so insistent that each congregation be governed by its own members that after some years of discussion, they signed the Cambridge Platform in 1648. This is the document that first laid out how congregations should be constituted and work. Our congregations work within the frame of congregational polity, essentially a fancy term for covenants for congregations. And especially as Unitarianism spread from Massachusetts and then New England, sometimes we are really bad at this. Actually, we're usually really bad at this. However, for our founders, the autonomy of each congregation did not imply either self-sufficiency or isolation from other congregations. They were meant to be a community of independent churches, giving and taking counsel and helping each other in other ways. This is where the idea of the Unitarian Universalist Association of member congregations came from. So congregations make covenants together, and individual members of congregations make covenants together. That's another part of our heritage from the Cambridge Platform, the forming of churches around covenants. Covenants are a commitment and aspiration to work and be together in religious community. As a pluralistic faith that draws people from many traditions, covenants are what help us navigate our differences. They are living texts, not statements of faith or doctrine, but words that must be lived into and, when broken, must be returned to in reconciliation. Joining a church means covenanting to journey with your neighbors, other members, in spiritual growth. The Blake Covenant, one used by many congregations, goes, "Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another." Love is the foundation of the work to be done within and among us. We commit to mutual learning and teaching and challenging and growing. We commit to the work of being in relationship. We commit to supporting and serving our community within and without. At our best, we commit to allowing the margins to hold the center by identifying the margins and holding them. As the world has become more obviously challenging to some of us in the last 10 or so years, for some, especially during this previous presidential administration, our call as Unitarian Universalists has, in some ways, sharpened and been challenged, both from within and without. And who we are matters to how we respond to those challenges. It's not just congregations and individuals who struggle with living into covenants. our ministers do as well. During the 2019 General Assembly, a minister from Washington self-published a book titled The Gadfly Papers. The book is full of racism, sexism, transphobia, ableism, and generally a disregard for those who are marginalized. The book was freely handed out from a booth at General Assembly. Given its sensational and toxic histories and theologies, the minister was quickly told how concerning and harmful his work was to many who were present at General Assembly, including those to whom the book had deliberately been given. The minister then declined to engage in conversation with individuals, with representatives for the General Assembly, or any group, including our Ministers Association, any who attempted to talk with him, and so declined to agree to be in right relationship with the gathered community, and after several days was not allowed to return. But not until after a lot of damage had been done and continues to happen. The damage has rippled throughout Unitarian Universalism and continues under the so-called respectable guise of the Fifth Principle Project and in other ways. Those like this minister who do not support our faith's work to address white supremacy culture in the wider world, and especially within our own faith, feel more justified and emboldened by the publishing of this work and the subsequent work and the backlash that they have both gotten from Unitarian Universalists. A well-known writer and chaplain, Kate Braestrup, whose work helped me recognize my own call to ministry, has supported the minister who wrote the General Assembly book, and Stoking the Fire challenged Unitarian Universalists to answer the question, am I still a Unitarian Universalist minister? While this may not seem important in general to our laity, I believe it is because this is about who we are, and how your ministers agree to be in relationship is reflective of our shared values and ethics, as well as both our history and visions for the future, and the way we dream for our congregants to be in relationship with each other. So I can only answer that question given the information that I shared with you earlier, that our faith has been defined by covenant. And thus the short answer to her question is no. Ministry is many things, but easy is not one of them. There are reasons why some ministers do some things and others don't. Some ministers choose not to go into fellowship with the Unitarian Universalist Association. Whether or not a minister has done this, there are two collegial organizations that ministers can join specifically for ministers. This allows ministers to be recognized as colleagues and to be in covenant with each other. The covenant of our relationships is laid out in guidelines, and all members of either of these organizations are bound by their respective covenant. Breaking of covenant has consequences. We are working to be better about reconciling. Ordination by a Unitarian Universalist congregation does make a person a minister, but it does not make them a Unitarian Universalist minister. This goes for professional or lay ministers, a fact demonstrated fairly clearly by the Jersey Universalist Church I mentioned at the beginning of this sermon. What does matter is the relationships, and specifically the covenants we keep. This is so important to our Ministers Association that while I was a community minister serving in a hospital, I was obligated to maintain good standing to be affiliated with a congregation. I would have anyway because I love our congregations, but it's a requirement for community ministers to be in right relationship with and to be accountable not only to our colleagues, but also to our shared faith. It matters whose we are. A hallmark of being a member of a religious community is practicing the faith with others. Religion cannot happen alone. Spirituality can, of course, but not religion, and certainly not ours, where we are connected in all places, by covenant and by the need to be in relationship with each other. As a people who have rejected creeds and other statements of faith for at least a few generations, there is nothing that binds us as Unitarian Universalists other than our covenants. Although some Christian faiths engage in covenanting, Unitarian Universalists are unique in that covenants are how we define ourselves. No creeds, no doctrines, no statements of faith are asked of us. Covenants are how we know both who we are and who we want to be. Those who do not covenant with us simply are not Unitarian Universalists. Covenants are brilliant and can be powerful tools as they are based in mutual relationship. The book that was published and handed out at the 2019 General Assembly was deeply damaging to many, to members of that minister's own congregation, to the people it was given to at General Assembly, to my friends and colleagues who are trans and non-binary and queer, anti-racist, women, disabled, and Black, brown, and Indigenous. And beyond the damage created by this book, further damage was done when people expressed their hurt and the author declined or really refused to engage in conversation with any of them about the damage done. He refused to be held accountable or to return to covenant. This happened repeatedly. It's the adult equivalent of saying, "I'm taking my marbles and going home." It's not relational. Adding to this, the book makes arguments in the name of logic and reason. We white liberals value our intelligence and believe in the value of logic and reason, and I have learned this to be an expression of white supremacy culture. The book was written as a reaction to the work that Unitarian Universalists have been engaging in intentionally and deeply the last few years to address the white supremacy culture within ourselves and our institutions. The book is just the kind of thing many of us are working to grow away from. This book was a blatant refusal to engage in this anti-white supremacy work, followed by a blatant refusal to engage in any way in the practice that is the core of our faith. Unitarian Universalism cannot work when individuals refuse to be in a relationship where the individuals, or congregations for that matter, refuse to communicate with each other, to be accountable, to be in covenant. We do not ask that things go perfectly, only that we continue to try. And this is critically important for those of us who have power in the dynamic. Why all this matters is because, in Leslie Takahashi's words, the margins hold the center. when we cannot be accountable to each other, even to those in the center of power, how can we possibly be accountable to those who are at the margins of power? If we cannot be accountable to the margins, the center cannot hold. Maybe when you were young, you remember throwing a tarp up in the air. Without a strong hold on the edges of the tarp, the whole thing gets loose and collapses. Working at the margins shows us where we need to grow to get closer to who we want to be. Shows us the work that needs to be done. Shows us the way forward. And shows us where we are failing. The margins are where our faith has the most promise to bring us closer to the beloved kingdom we seek. And it is at the margins that we recognize where the bounds of Unitarian Universalism are, and how we know the work that we yet need to do to become the people we want to be. We are a people who moves ever forward to answer the call of justice here on earth, the only place where we can be sure justice is possible. Calling on our Unitarian forebears who believed earnestly in the promise of human potential for good, in the depth of that promise, the being of that promise, and on our Universalist forebears who believed as earnestly in the promise of human equity, in the breadth of that promise, the doing of that promise. We are called ever forward by their visions for our faith, even as we live into them differently than they could have possibly imagined. This is their legacy, our heritage, and our covenant with the past, present, and future. We cannot live into this covenant when we leave those who have been marginalized behind in favor of those who refuse to be accountable, who refuse to be in right relationship, who refuse to live into the dreams promised to us that justice shall one day roll down and we will be part of it, so long as we work together. Indeed, this is the only way it can be done.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the will Bye.